Good evening. Welcome to the 22 here on SF Live. I'm your host, Glenn Davis. Before we get started, I'd like to say a couple of things. One, thanks to everybody who sent emails regarding last week's show and even the show the week before that with Ahimsa Porta Sumchai, who was a candidate for mayor. Also want to note that the phone line is open, so feel free to give us a call if you have any questions or comments. We're going to continue on with our theme this week of San Francisco issues. You know, housing, development, schools, other issues surrounding City Hall. And to do that, we have Paul Hogarth with BeyondCron.org and the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. So, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let's just jump right in. I wanted to first talk about the Ed Jew article that your colleague had written,
Randy Shaw,
on Tuesday, right?
I believe it was Monday or Tuesday.
Monday, yeah. About how Ed Jew is a diversion.
It is.
So I wanted to pick on that diversion for what, which was kind of stated in the article, but expanding those things. But first I wanted to get your thoughts on, which, and this may play right into him being a diversion, on the whole Ed Jew scenario itself. And then a question would be, you know, is one of the diversions that the mayor has to look active in a race where he's running against, you know, almost no one, although some of the San Francisco Democratic clubs would say differently because they haven't endorsed him. Mm-hmm. So, one, do you think that the mayor is one of the factors of that?
Well, I think the mayor is certainly trying to find some type of diversion right now. I mean, he's been a very hands-off mayor who has not really accomplished that much, all things considered. And so certainly I think the announcement he made a few weeks ago about requesting that all of his department heads and all his commission appointees resign was a tactic, a calculated move on his part, because I think the public is uncomfortable with the fact that he's just going to be crowned for a second term. And so it was a method of him to look like he's being assertive and proactive. As far as the Ed Jew situation being a diversion, I think the problem, I would fault the mayor that he didn't act sooner. This has been going on for months and months and months. I mean, I think it's really a soap opera of anything. I mean, it's really sad. I mean, Ed Jew has not exactly done anything to be his own, you know, he's become his own worst enemy in the process. I mean, you don't get charged with allegations you don't live in San Francisco and turn yourself into the police station in Burlingame.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, the idea that Gavin Newsom had this big resolve and was torn with, you know, with the same level of John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis is absurd. If anything, I fault the mayor for not having acted sooner and waiting really until the last minute when the final revelations of it wasn't just that he took $40,000 in cash from the FBI, but that he extorted the business that if you don't give me the $40,000, you're not going to get your permit, which is a lot more serious.
Right.
So, no, I think Newsom hemmed and hawed and waited for a while. But it is a diversion in the sense that this is something that everyone's obsessed about and talking about. It's something that is really not going to have a long-term effect on the city. A year from now, no one will care about Ed Jew.
Right.
But it is distracting us from a lot of the issues that are important, that should matter, that San Franciscans should be talking about.
Right. So we'll get to that, what they're talking about. 2 minutes, though.
Okay.
First off, what do you think about the other candidates running for mayor? And what do you think about the fact that so many of the, like Harvey Milk endorsed Quinton? Just briefly thoughts on that.
Well, I think that a lot of the candidates we're seeing running, like Chicken John Rinaldi, Grasshopper Kaplan, you got to understand, those people would be running for mayor against Newsom, even if the mayor had a serious opponent. These people are very colorful personalities. They have no base in the community. When I was in college, I had a professor who was talking about people who run for Congress all the time, even though they have no chance in hell, like that Republican Mike DeNunzio who runs against Pelosi. As he said, quote, losers is not strong enough a term to describe those types of people. So, I mean, like, they have nothing better to do. They're just running to attract attention. The one candidate I do think, there's a couple of candidates I do think who are actually running legitimate campaigns, even though they don't have a chance of winning. They're actually trying to be out there for the messages. One of them is Dr. Ahimsa Sumchai. I think she really is running to earnestly talk about the health effects of Bayview Hunters Point. The other candidate is Quentin Mecke. And Quentin Mecke is a progressive activist. I've known him personally for many, many years. He's cut his teeth on all of the right campaigns for Matt Gonzalez, for Ross Mercurini. And he entered the race really on the last day because he felt, look, if you're a progressive in this town and you want to be able to cast a protest vote for somebody without being embarrassed about it, really, saying I voted for, you know, the Grasshopper Kaplan or someone like that, I'm here to provide an alternative. And the one thing about Quentin is that, and I think the reason we're seeing him either getting endorsed by the Harvey Milk Club or blocking a Newsom endorsement at other political clubs, is because he's going there, he's doing a good job, he's articulate, he's talking about the homicide rate, he's talking about homelessness, and he's talking about, this mayor, we can do better. And that as a result, what's going on is I think a lot of people are saying, this guy's a good guy. I think we can cast a protest vote for him. And I think that's what the mayor's really afraid of.
Right. So back to our original, what we were talking about, the diversion, since I created my own diversion for you there. Sorry about that. So edu is the diversion. What are they diverting us from? What don't they want us to be thinking about here in San Francisco?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. First of all, I think all of us who were following the Rincon Hill issue a couple years ago were like, oh, I guess this is good because it's going to get some money for South of Market businesses, or not, South of Market community groups. Now all of a sudden we've got this hill, this huge high-rise that's sticking out like a sore thumb. And it's kind of scary to think the number of wealthy condo owners who are going to move into the district, who are going to move into the city. It's, Calvin Welch has a line of, housing's always most important because who gets to live here gets to vote here.
Right.
Those people are not going to vote for a Chris Daly. They're not going to vote for a Ross Mercury. It's going to change the political demographics of the city. And of course, the Rincon Tower is only the first of several.
Right.
So there's a whole issue of the Trans Bay Terminal. There's all these plans of like a 100-story condo tower to be at this big Trans Bay Center. We're all for consolidating our transportation system so we don't have the bus terminal here, the BART station there, and the Caltrain station about 50 miles that away. I mean, it is a good idea to consolidate and centralize all of our transit stations together. The problem is that, and as the Guardian did a really good job covering this, is that what's going on is because Arnold Schwarzenegger and the state government is refusing to invest any public funds into making this a reality, the city is having to sell its soul effectively to private for-profit housing developers who are saying, fine, we're going to pitch in and help you build this consolidated Trans Bay Terminal in exchange for letting us build a 100-story condo tower that we're going to sell off as $1 million condos to people. That's a big issue. The other issue, of course, is the ever-growing homicide rate. I mean, the mayor in 2004 promised to sign his own recall petition if the homicide rate didn't go down. Other problems going on is Muni. Muni's a disaster. It's getting a disaster every single year. Something's got to be done about it. And the other thing is the constant threat of gentrification, not just new development of housing that's not really serving people who live here, but the displacement of long-term tenants, whether it's through Ellis Act evictions, whether it's through Skyline Realty, a.k.a. City Apartments, buying up more of our buildings and forcing out our long-term rent-controlled tenants.
Right. And speaking of development, so Lennar Corp falls under that. When I say they, I mean the Chronicle is they in terms of mainstream media here in the city. But so along with the Trans Bay Terminal, the dialogue regarding what's going on with Lennar Corp in the Bayview, which Dr. Samchai and hundreds have been pushing and discussing, that we need this dialogue and people need to understand that people's health are at stake because of this development, and these people who aren't even. These people who are being affected, their health is being affected, won't even be here in 10 years.
That's right.
Because of what you're saying. So I know the school board just passed a resolution which may or may not be symbolic, but the city has done nothing.
Well, the city did nothing in the sense that there was a vote at the Board of Supervisors, and I believe it failed 6-5, to order the Public Health Department to tell Lennar to stop the excavation of highly toxic asbestos being dug up in Hunters Point area. The thing about the Lennar issue, it really goes back to a year ago. The Board of Supervisors, by a 7-4 vote, sold Bayview Hunters Point to the redevelopment agency. They created the largest redevelopment agency in San Francisco and essentially making all of Bayview Hunters Point a redevelopment zone. What's going on now is that the Lennar Corporation is a big national Florida-based developer. They're kind of like Halliburton, because what they do is that they come in with cities and redevelopment agencies, and they get into these contracts that will provide we'll build all of this housing for you. We've got a whole team of experts to work on it. And what's interesting is that there is a very high-level staffer who works for Lennar, who's I think their director of community relations, who used to work for the redevelopment agency. Yeah, so
that's classic.
We wonder why suddenly Lennar's getting all these contracts. There's another side issue, which is, as you recall, a year ago, the San Francisco 49ers threatened to leave San Francisco. And the mayor is frantically trying to do what he can to keep them there. And like all big sports franchises, they always try to pressure saying, well, if you give us enough corporate welfare, we won't leave. And so now the city, through the redevelopment agency, has proposed expanding. They were going to redevelop the Alice Griffith homes. They were going to redevelop Hunters Point area and consolidating that with building a new stadium. And guess who's going to get the whole contract? Lennar.
Right. Right, and that's still the proposal on the table? Or
it's still the proposal on the table. It's going through. And the other thing, too, is that the Board of Supervisors, by allowing the redevelopment agency to control all of these land use decisions in Bayview Hunters Point, have effectively said, we're no longer responsible. We no longer, the Board of Supervisors can no longer vote on binding issues of what's going to happen in terms of whether Lennar will get the contract. The redevelopment agency now has that jurisdiction.
So they've allowed themselves to wash their hands. What was the vote on that?
It was 7-4. The 4 supervisors who opposed that were Chris Daly, Tom Amiano, Ross Mercarimi, and Gerardo Sandoval. The real disgrace, as far as I'm concerned, is Sophie Maxwell. Yeah. She really has been hoodwinked into supporting the Bayview redevelopment plan under the idea that it's going to bring jobs for the city. She's been hoodwinked into the idea that it'll help build affordable housing in the area, but you got to understand how a redevelopment agency operates. Redevelopment agencies are able to kind of float bonds in order to build affordable housing, but then those bonds have to be paid back. And the idea is that you pay back those bonds by property tax revenues in the area. So sure, redevelopment can go in and take over a neighborhood and they're going to build maybe 100 units of affordable housing. But in order to pay off that cost in the long run, you need to build a lot more high-cost market-rate condos. So really, the whole model of how redevelopment operates is it's an engine of gentrification. All of the promises that were made years ago in the Fillmore and Yerba Buena, really resulted in mass displacement.
Right, and that's a model that they're just continuing.
Yeah, and the thing is that, you hear about redevelopment, like, oh, well, it ain't what it used to be. It has a horrible legacy, but we've learned from our mistakes. And look at Marsha Rosen. She's the new executive director of the redevelopment agency. She's a former activist. Well, first of all, Newsom just got rid of her recently. But the other thing, too, is that it doesn't matter who's in control at the redevelopment agency. It doesn't really matter if you get the most well-intentioned progressive people in the world. They're running redevelopment. The whole structure of how you finance affordable housing construction in redevelopment areas is inherently going to lead to gentrification.
Right. Just because of the way the model's built. We've seen that throughout history. Yeah. I think, was it Justin Herman who was responsible for all that?
He was the guy who said that south of Market was too valuable area for the poor people to park in.
Yeah. Oh, he's classic.
Yeah.
He is classic. He's one of many, I think. Every big city has a Justin Herman. Yeah. What do you think about McGoldrick's? Well, actually, first off, do you think a lot of people say Mitch Katz isn't being honest, or Mitch Katz is providing ill information? I don't know if you want to,
I don't want to go on the record whether or not Mitch Katz is a liar. I'm not. I'm just saying, though, I think that Mitch, like a lot of these department heads, is pretty much, doing the bidding for the Newsom administration. So you can't really go out of your way to say that we made a mistake selling Bayview Hunters Point to the redevelopment agency, who's now gotten in this contract with Lennar that is poisoning the health of a lot of people. I'm not going to say he's dishonest. I'm just saying that there's a lot of incentive based upon the dynamics not to admit the more gory details of what may be really going on.
Right. Okay. And McGoldrick's vote, do you think is he a surprise to people? Not voting for, being one of those 7 votes.
Well, what's interesting about what happened there is that there is kind of a protocol at the Board of Supervisors that if you're a supervisor and if something is being voted on, it's in your district, the other supervisors generally go along with what you want. So I think that, I don't know about McGoldrick in particular, but because Sophie Maxwell was signed on to the Bayview redevelopment plan, I think a lot of the other supervisors were like, well, it's her district, it doesn't matter. The sheer hypocrisy of that was with Trinity Plaza, where all of a sudden Chris Daly had been really instrumental in trying to come up with a deal in which a developer was going to build new units of rent-controlled housing under new construction at 8th and Market. It would revitalize the neighborhood. It would show that we can improve mid-market without making it a redevelopment area. And all of a sudden, on election day, Sophie Maxwell and Jake McGoldrick call an emergency hearing to revisit the whole plan. Now, Sophie Maxwell, who basically had, benefited from the idea of supervisors deferring to her district, gets herself involved and goes directly against Chris Daly in his own district in a project affecting District 6.
Yeah, and that actually killed the Daly deal, right? I mean,
it didn't really kill it. I think it came incredibly close to endangering it. Yeah. And I think that Angela Sangiacomo, the developer, really came close to walking away. I think enough of us got involved, us being the Tenderloin Housing Clinic and other housing activists, to make sure that the project still happened, that it was able to go through. But you got to admit, it kind of scared the Jesus out of us after years and years and years and years of fighting. First of all, the owner just wanted to tear down the building. We, tried to get an ordinance passed saying you can't tear it down, and then finally he came to the table to negotiate with us, and it looked like we had a good deal, and all of this was going to fall apart because Sophie Maxwell and Jake McGoldrick had a problem with it.
Yeah. That was interesting. Matter of fact, your paper did some good reporting on
Thank you.
Or you're online. So other diversions that the Chronicle or the Examiner may be pulling away, things that because that Ed Jew is kind of putting a curtain over issues here in the city. I think you mentioned Skyline Realty. Yeah. And
well, I mean, it's not like I don't think there's like some organized conspiracy where there are certain things going on right now and that we have to distract the masses with an Ed Jew issue. I think it's more along the lines that the Ed Jew matter is really sad. It's obvious that he's going to be out of there. He's already been removed, at least temporarily. A year from now, no one will care anymore. It's all basically a big daytime soap opera. But in the long run, there are a lot of these structural long-term issues that are going to have a much bigger effect on the city that we're not talking about.
Yeah, that's true. I just want to point out, somebody just called. I missed it. I apologize for that. Oh, there we go. So let's try a phone call here. Hello, you're on SF Live. Do you have a question or a comment? I don't know if I can hear them. Well, that's unfortunate because somehow you're not piping in. Let me check back here. So unfortunately, that's not going to work for us tonight. It doesn't look like so. Please call back another time, and we'll get that straightened out. I don't know why that's not coming through. So. Unfortunate for that. I want to get back to. That's too bad. I want to get back to the issue of if it's in your district, you can, like if we were supervisors and something was going down in your district, I would automatically vote for it.
Well, not automatically, but there's generally a respect for the local. And I think that, another example was 3400 Cesar Chavez, which was this plot of land in the Mission in which a developer is going to build condos, only 9 of which are marginally affordable. And Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition and other housing activists have really come together to try to come up with an alternative. And the question was, are we just going to rubber stamp this condo project and forever foreclose the possibility of getting affordable housing built there? Tom Amiano, who represents that district, was with the activists saying, I don't want this project in my neighborhood. And the vote was 6-5 against Amiano's position. I believe the votes to not let the condo project go through were Amiano, Mercarimi, Daly, Peskin, and Maxwell. The 6 votes against it were Jew, Alioto, Peer, Ellsburn, McGoldrick, Sandoval, and I guess who's the other one left? Dufty. Yeah. So, that was an example, of course, of, McGoldrick and Sandoval. You'd think that politically they're closer to Amiano. They would generally defer to something in his district, and yet they came around and McGoldrick especially, cast the deciding vote against it.
Yeah. Which he's done that a couple times lately.
He's done that a few times, but the interesting thing that happened there was that McGoldrick was in the process of being potentially recalled in his District 1 race, and he had to raise a ton of money. His campaign committee, Citizens Against Recall Abuse, and the developer, the condo developer of 3400 Cesar Chavez, held a fundraiser for Jake McGoldrick the night before that vote.
Right.
And Jake, who normally is very critical of for-profit developers, who's very much of a champion for affordable housing, ended up allowing the condo project to sail through right after the developers had given him a lot of money. Yeah. So, I'm not going to go and say this influenced it, but I think that certainly, you could draw your own conclusions about what happened there.
Yeah. So I guess the short of what I was going to say was, is that somebody respectively, because it's in your district and not mine, and we'll probably have to do this kind of quickly because we're getting ready to wrap up. But would that be an argument to get rid of district elections?
I don't think so.
Because I hear people say, that's a reason.
I think district elections serve a really important function. I think they allow grassroots community activists to get elected at the local level. I think, in general, the district supervisor does know best what's going on in the neighborhood, and you should generally defer. The problem with Maxwell, selling out her own neighborhood to Bayview Hunters Point is that's an example, actually. Even though Bayview Hunters Point is in her district, that's not where the votes are. She represents District 10. Most of the votes are in Potrero Hill.
Right, because they're going to vote.
And so, no, I think all things considered, I think district elections are a good thing. And also, the other thing to keep in mind, I grew up in Chicago.
Right.
We've got district elections there. I have never heard of any city as large as San Francisco that does not elect its city council by district. So for me, the concept of having the entire city council elected at large, having to raise as much money as potentially a mayoral campaign is absurd.
Yeah, it seems insane to me, too.
It is.
You think that's going to be a battle coming up?
Well, I think that downtown always wants to kill district elections, and I think that the danger is that they're going to take EdJu, they're going to take all of the shenanigans with Chris Daly and use that as the poster child for what's wrong with district elections. But I think I agree with Aaron Peskin on this. I think he's pretty much said district elections are here to stay. Voters are used to it. Voters like it. It would take a lot to abolish district elections. I think they're going to try to get rid of it, though. They're going to, they try.
Right.
All the time.
So we've got to wrap up. We've got about 25 seconds. Before I thank Paul, I want to thank those people who called. I know somebody's trying right now, so unfortunately it's not working. Please call in the future. Next week, love to hear from you. And I hope that Paul will return because I would love for him to take your call. So I apologize for that. I'll see you next week. Tentatively, Quentin Mecchi, who we spoke about, candidate for mayor, will be on. Thank you. Have a good week.